All right, welcome to our theme 3 for the Honor Study Topic Zoom, hosted by Ira. Tonight we're talking about theme 3, which is trade, craftsmanship, and industry. Our topic question tonight is how have industrial advancements affected craftsmanship during COVID-19? And our special guest host tonight is the one and only Steve Fritz from the Missouri region.
Woohoo!
Yay, Missouri. All right, guys. I am not Susan Edwards at all, nor am I Barbara. So I'm going to try to be just me and talk about things about to the seventh generation, inheritance and legacy. Theme 3 is the one that I wrote, and I chose it because this was the one that I was more concerned about. How do we engage our technical students? How do we find a way to bring in a lot of our industry, our welders, our allied health students, our mechanics? How do we think about ways to engage them in the honors program that we do in terms of projects that make sense to them and would bring them into this? Now, is it true that it's going to be interesting to everybody? Of course. There's lots of different things we can talk about. And my goal is to kind of just define some terms and to kind of give you some ideas that I was thinking of, particularly in relationship to Illinois. And things that you might study in terms of the Illinois region and the area and the locations that you guys do. So first off, I want to talk about things that you need. Hopefully you have the honors study guide. Please have the honors study guide. I know that this will be shocking to you, but there are many, many entries that are submitted that don't actually reference the study guide. And I think that would probably be shocking to many people. As you write your honors essay, you need to make sure that you're referencing the topic, that it says to the seventh generation, inheritance and legacy, and you actually name the theme that you're working on. And you should probably work in the overarching question as well, so that the judges know that you're actually tying all of your research to this lovely guide that we spent 2 years trying to write. We did it just for you, right? So make sure that you've read the guide, make sure that you're doing that. But this year, there's something I also want you to be very aware of, and I want you to grab this thing and I want you to use it. I fought really hard. It was a personal battle to have the honors study guide workbook. One of the things that I thought that students needed was a step-by-step work through, something that you could print off, something that you can write on, something you can jot ideas down, and help you guide your way through the actual process of honors and action. And then at the end, you have something to go back to that you've already written down all of your information in, and you can use this to write your essay. So it is out on the Honor Study Guide pages on ptk.org. And when you look at helpful resources on that page, which I have down here at the bottom, you'll see there's the HIA workbook, right? Hint, hint, I'm trying to get a college project one for next year. So it's my personal goal. Susan will appreciate that. Also, make sure that you have your honors action rubrics. Most of you guys are probably aware of this. The best thing to do is print off your rubrics and then delete everything that's not full points and only keep the full points. And that's what you're shooting for. Why would you look at the 1 point section when you know that you want the 5 and the 10? So make sure that you're keeping those handy as we think about this process. And then the last one is an open mind and a sense of curiosity, because honors in action is really fun. My wife and I, Joe, the regional coordinator from Missouri, we just have a blast finding interesting things to study. right? We find things in the most interesting and weird places sometimes. So I encourage you to think about, where could I get this info? Where could I find information that might be interesting about Illinois? And I can give you like a couple of television shows that we watch all the time, and we encourage our chapter officers to watch, because it's where we get most of our inspiration, believe it or not. So strange. Mysteries at the Museum is the best show to find ideas about. Uh-oh, sorry. Um, It'll stop in like 3 rings. There you go. Random fact, we had our house worked on and they cut the phone line, and now the only line that works is in this room. So who knew that that was the way that was going to work out, right? The other thing then is Mysteries at the Museum. So much fun. You can get so many ideas from Mysteries at the Museum. And another show that I've recently discovered, actually my wife is the one that recently discovered this crazy thing, and we end up watching it like so much. It is the Smithsonian Channel, and it's called Aerial America. It is the fun. It's such a cool show, but they go through every state and they go through different cities and different regions. And when they're doing that, then they talk about all of these different things that are in your state. So there's one about Illinois, and they're flying all over Illinois. And hold on, I've got to turn. Why is this not going off? Back from the curtain. That was just super weird. All right, back. So you can find so many interesting things about your state that gives you some ideas to research. So just some random things to think about in terms of where you're looking at project ideas and things like that. The also thing that I always want students to be aware of in chapters is you don't have to do life-changing massive projects, right? Especially in this world of digital right now, the likelihood that we're going to be able to do face-to-face projects is so slim at this point. So you're going to be doing things that are virtual. So think about awareness and advocacy projects, and especially things around your city and your demographic area. So it'll be a lot of fun to think about those types of things, okay? So with those things in mind, the overarching question then for this theme is, how have inherited practices of trade, craftsmanship, and industry shaped our world, and what legacies will we inspire? I want you to think about the past and the future. So that's very difficult to try to weave those into the same project, right? But if you think about it, one of the things that you can do is a lot of the history, right? The inheritance is a lot of that's going to be your research. A lot of that's going to be the things that you're pulling from to understand where we are today, and then thinking about the legacy that we are going to inspire. Hint, hint, subtle, subtle. You really do need to have the words inheritance and legacy in your question. That's one of the things that is also surprisingly shocking, is the number of chapters who don't actually use the terminology of the questions that we're thinking about. Now, this is just your overarching question, right? This isn't your research question. Your research question needs to tie to this question. And if it doesn't, then we're not in the right theme. So we really need to be focusing on trade, craftsmanship, and industry, and the ways that it has shaped the world. And there's so much that you can think about in terms of this one. So what I decided to do, just to have some fun here, is to think about this in terms of each of the words and the definitions in terms of those things. I find when you're doing research, remember, good scientists always define the words that they're working with, so that way people understand exactly what they're talking about. So for us, and as we were writing this, for us, trade was the business of buying and selling, or bartering. That's literally what we were thinking about in terms of trade. Thinking about trade routes, thinking about the Silk Road, thinking about the way that goods are brought across the globe and or in your own area in terms of those types of things. So as we were talking about trade, then things that I wanted you guys to think about. I wanted you to think a little bit about like traditional type things. And also I wanted you to think about more kind of like outside the box trade, things that maybe you wouldn't realize could be pretty interesting to actually study. So traditional things you could study: trade routes. What are the trade routes across Illinois? Where do those lie? How do they impact the region that you're in? With that one, I really threw out Route 66. Pontiac, Illinois, there is actually one of the big places that celebrates Route 66. So there's a lot of information there. And Route 66 can give you a wealth of things to study in terms of this theme for a trade. Think about what Route 66 did as it connected the country, and how it allowed people to travel, and how it allowed trade to then move across the country. But more importantly, think about its inheritance as it then lost all of its impact. When the interstate system was developed because of Eisenhower, in his desire to make sure that we had fast ways to transport weapons and soldiers in case there was an invasion, and how then that trade route that became part of that then impacted the regions. Loss of business, loss of all those cool little shops and all those little mom and pop diners and all those things. But also think about the legacy of how those things are coming back. So I'm hoping that this is making sense in terms of things that you would think about with that. Because I'm going to come back to Route 66 and some of those other things as we talk about industry as well. Also think about stock markets, right? You've got the stock market in Chicago, you got the stock market in New York. Think about digital trade and the way that the world is impacted globally, and how a stock market in China can dramatically impact what happens in the United States. I'm not a big finance guy, so this would not be an interesting topic for Steve, but it is fascinating for somebody else, right? Also think about international trade. Think about the fact now that trade is just not me. I'm not going to ship something, right? There are people whose job are to digitally track global trade and to determine what routes are best and where to direct flow. You can actually get online and look at like the digital overview of the trade around our planet and see the flow of goods and services. And in this day and age, COVID is really impacting the way we trade. So you can think about international trade markets. You can think about international trade deals. There's so much there. All we have to do is call Blake, and Blake will tell us all about this, because that's a Blake thing, right? Also Bitcoin, right? Shipping, and also native and indigenous folks and how those people were impacted by trade and things like that. Fun places that you have in Illinois to think about, like the trade and the way that things evolved. The Cahokia outside on the other side of St. Louis, looking at indigenous trade and market and things like that. You have a lot of native and indigenous sites and information in Illinois. That would be a wealth of information to explore in terms of that kind of stuff. So hopefully some of those traditional things are things that you're thinking about. But then there are some more kind of like outside the box things that would be a lot of fun to talk about trade. Susan Edwards, I know, threw some of this stuff out there probably as well. Sports. There's an entire industry of trading players and the way that we trade between teams and the give and take and those types of things, and the competition that occurs. We have fantasy sports leagues that are all about this trading of players. So that is a legitimate thing that you could study. Really, really is. Even trading cards are a thing that you could think about in terms of trade. Also with modern things, talking about bartering services in terms of, like, I just recently was visiting with some friends who own a wedding business, and couples were bartering the cost of the venue with the services that they provide with their own industry. They gave an example of, there was a tattoo artist that was like, well, I'll give you this much money in exchange for use of your venue. And they didn't think that was a very fair trade. But then you've also got that view of what is a fair trade. So there's many ways to think about this. And I hope these are giving you some ideas that you might explore in terms of those types of things. Some non-traditional things, eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, especially exploring information in terms of like the safety of those things. Like, what is the legacy that we are receiving from these types of exchanges? Is it beneficial? Are we going back to an older way of trade and bartering? Or are we still moving forward with digital and global shipping and things like that? This last one was one that it really struck me as something that is a big part of trade, especially as a Chicago thing, the Chris Crandall Market. It is all about old-fashioned traditional trade. And what is the Chris Crandall Market's legacy for Chicago and for artisans and just for trade in general in terms of that kind of stuff? So here are the things that I think about in terms of trade. So hopefully that is making some sense. Hoping that's giving you guys some ideas in terms of that one, but because there's a lot to study in terms of those things. Also, please feel free to throw out questions, interrupt me, do whatever we need to do to holler about stuff. Otherwise, I'll just like randomly ramble. That's what I do. All right, craftsmanship. This one is my favorite, by the way. I really, really think this one is a lot of fun. Thinking about skill in making things, especially things that are made by hand. So you think about the quality that has been put into something and what we have inherited and what we've lost in that inheritance when we talk about craftsmanship. That I think is the most important aspect of this, is what are we preserving? What are we losing? Are we going to be able to do the same things that we were able to do in the past? So I'm thinking of things like there's a really cool guy from England. It's Pinsett Tailors, and he is a very young gentleman, but he handcrafts Edwardian and Victorian clothing, and he wears it on a daily basis. But he also sells it to other people, and it's preserving this heritage of handmade couture fashion. So that is a fun and interesting thing as well. Thinking about craftsmanship globally in terms of major industries like the perfume industry. This one fascinates me. Did you know that there are perfume houses that have been around for over 300 years that are still in business and have very, very sought after colognes that are very different than your traditional mass-produced Calvin Klein in terms of those types of things. So there's lots of things to explore in terms of craftsmanship and what we might be losing. Here in Springfield, good old Spring Patch, Missouri, we have Branson about 30 minutes away, and we have Silver Dollar City, which is an 1890s theme park. And part of that whole theme park's allure and part of its entire mystique is that it presents legacy crafts that we are losing. So you have blacksmiths, and you have wood carvers, and you have candle makers and handmade candy makers, and you have milliners who come in and make hats, people who are handcrafting violins and dulcimers and mandolins. So there's a lot there. That what is important about that? I want you guys to think about those things. So what about Illinois stuff? What can we look at, right? Craftsmanship in Illinois. See, these are some of just fun things that I have either been to or I have seen. My favorite one is Casey, Illinois. the home of the biggest things ever. So thinking about how they used both trade and craftsmanship to reinvent their city. When Route 66 and all the industries came, that city, Casey, Illinois, was dying. And there was a guy there who said, let's do something really interesting and let's make really big stuff and see if we can get people to come. And funny enough, the city council did not think it was a very good idea. But he went ahead and built something really big anyway. And then all of a sudden it worked. And so the whole city starts becoming this little craftsmanship place where they're building really big things like big mailboxes and things like that to bring people to their city. That's craftsmanship, that's trade. Thinking about the impact of those types of things. A couple of fun, interesting ones for the fine liquor folks that we have around us. In Peoria, there's a Black Band Distillery, and it is actually converted its industry, it's converted its craftsmanship into hand sanitizer because of COVID. So you can look at how craftsmen are responding to the need of our community during COVID, and how these things might be things that you might be interested in. Then Evanston has Few Spirits, which is really focused on developing fine handcrafted gins and bourbons and rums. So also another thing that you can look at in terms of that. Here in Springfield, the same thing. We have a lot of little distilleries that are popping up that are creating their own craft liqueurs. What does that mean in terms of legacy for large liquor companies? And what does it mean for them, and for these small craftsmen and their future in this industry? Is there a place for those folks? And will there continue to be a place for those people? So craftsmanship locally. Some other things, some well-known things from Illinois that maybe you're not aware of and would be interesting things to study. Vivian Mayer. Does anybody know Vivian Mayer? She's super cool, and you may not know her at all. She spent her whole life in Chicago and New York taking photos, but no one knew she was doing it. So she would travel, she had a camera every day of her life. And when she passed away, they found all of her work. And there's a film about her. And the legacy of this photographer and the things that she captured and the moments that she was capturing of real people in the real world, and the experiences that they were having, and then her own personal experience. What role does craftsmanship and photography play in the way that we view the past and the way that we see the future and where we might go? You can also look at photography and what lies it tells. Instagram is a big example of that. The curated life of Instagram and the lives that people don't really lead. So there's some interesting things there. Next one is super fun. I think this will be a really cool thing to study. Preston Jackson. Most of his time is spent in Decatur, and he's a sculptor. And he's very, very famous for sculptures that represent Martin Luther King and the race riots, and lots of things that you can look at in terms of the role of the artisan, the role of the sculpture, especially putting out monuments and the legacy they leave, especially now in our time of Black Lives Matter and the Southerns, all of the things from the Civil War. You know, what role do those monuments play, and do they play a positive role or a negative role? Do we need to erase them? Do we need to put them in museums to preserve history so we know what not to do again? Interesting things there, and you really have a really cool person that you can study in Illinois. Frank Lloyd Wright and his impact on architecture, Bear Run, all of the things that he has done. You can really look at the architecture aspect. Chicago, for those Chicagoland folk, There are so many architects and there are so many examples of architecture. You have Louis Sullivan, who was the father of skyscrapers. He's the guy that made them a thing. And Chicago has a big part to play in that. And what is their role and what is their legacy? Especially thinking about that in terms of the Twin Towers and the new Freedom Towers. So thinking about all of those types of things as well. I hope this is helping because I can't see your faces. So I hope you're smiling and nodding. All right, next one up is industry. Industry is manufacturing as an activity. It's the distinctive group of productive and profit-making enterprises. This is the big stuff, right? Illinois is full of industry, though you may not realize it. I think you probably do. But the impact of industry is a huge thing here. What inheritances did we have and what legacies do we have? Think about things like this: forests and industry. The railroad was a product of craftsmanship, which grew into industry, which needed to be able to trade. And because of it, we had to build these railroads. And in the process, we cut down so many trees. The number is staggering, by the way. The number is triple digits of trees that we took out. Here in the Ozarks, the tops of all of our mountains in the Ozarks, if you come down to here, you'll see, we call them balds because the best trees were on top. So they cut off all the trees that are on the top of all the mountains. And now all of our mountains are bald. And the impact environmentally of those, in terms of those types of things. And you can just watch the news daily and see the impact of industry and how it has hurt or hindered those types of things. Up in Illinois, you have all of the farming that's draining all the aquifers. So many things that you can look at. It's so cool. I'm kind of nerdy about this stuff, right? And here are your top industries in Illinois. I don't know if you guys realize these things. Business services, stock market, and all of those types of things related to the exchange of business and trade. It's massive industry in Illinois. Advanced manufacturing. You've got really cool inventions and things associated with manufacturing. The vacuum. Did you know that the zipper comes from Illinois? Because who knew? Right? Education is a massive industry of yours: agriculture, energy, biotechnology, and of course, sports. Right? If you know me and Schroeder, that's all sports ball to us. There you go. So I hope that I've given you some ideas. I'm not Susan Edwards, so I'm not a wealth of like a million research questions. But I wanted to just give you some thoughts and some ideas and then have you guys just kind of ask questions, I guess, in terms of that. I'm going to stop sharing this lovely screen so I can see you again. Was this helpful? Did you get did you get the idea of what this one is all about? Because I just ramble. It's just the way I do. Barbara has to put up with me all for all. Just ramble. Any thoughts or ideas or questions that you guys have? Did I give you what you needed?
Yeah, I think it was a very good presentation, and it really delve into more of thinking more about each element of trade and craftsmanship, so you can find a bigger idea of what to talk about and what to research. And I think another fun fact is barbed wire was actually invented in DeKalb, Illinois.
Yes, I saw that one as well.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's the thing that I always want students to understand is whenever I'm at Honors Institute or people are asking me questions about things, the thing that people are always like or are so worried about is that we don't have the resources to do this massive project. We don't have the resources to change the world. Well, we're not asking you to do that. We're asking you to research something that's interesting to you. It's where all research comes from, by the way, the things that interest you. Every PhD is because somebody is interested in that thing. Right? That's what they do. Think about what is interesting to you and what's local in terms of your for you in terms of that kind of stuff. I'm never afraid to share what our projects are and things like that. So what we're doing here in the Ozarks, my chapter is looking at at bluegrass music, and in particular, they're actually looking at the term bluegrass and what legacy does it have and what inheritance did it bring. And the students are finding out some very, very interesting things, that bluegrass is actually not a very popular term with people in the Ozarks, because it actually is a religious term that became popular when they removed fiddle music from the region, because the churches didn't want the fiddles, because the fiddle was the devil's instrument.
And didn't bluegrass music start in like the Appalachian Mountains?
Yes. But there's all these different types. So thinking about things that relate to you and your community, that you can really grab, like get your fingers in there and be like, this is so cool. Because we kicked around the whole artisan stuff at Silver Dollar City. We kicked around some stuff about old time cars, because that's a big thing in the Ozarks. Is the restoration and study of old vehicles from the Route 66 and things like that. So there's just a lot that your city has that maybe you don't realize that can be a really cool research project, because nobody knows the things that you're going to find out. My group, as they were studying the bluegrass, they were talking to a local author who is considered the expert in bluegrass music, and he actually said to them, maybe this is the time for me to take up the fight against that term, because I hate it so much. And we're like, well, that's kind of cool. So think about your community, think about your city and what you could research there, especially in this age where we're kind of confined to the digital. Like we know that our projects are going to be awareness and advocacy. We know that they're going to be creating movies and websites and promotional things that are going to be all online. And don't give up just because it's online. You can still do it. I promise. You can still do honors and action projects. You just have to get a little more creative in terms of how you're going to get that information out there.
No, if they are if they focus more on like Illinois or their community for an HIA, is that going to impact their college project, or is there a certain way you would maybe try and separate those?
I always tell all of my Missouri kids, just remember this: your honors and action project and your college project, never the twain shall meet. They are different things, and they should not be the same thing, and they should not double dip one another. Honors and action is about to the seventh generation, inheritance and legacy. Your college project is about the collaboration with your college. So that's what it's about. So you don't want them to meet anywhere in the middle. You can study things that are local that have nothing to do with your college. To be honest with you, when I read honors and action projects that have something to do with their college, I cringe a bit, because they're bordering on college projects, and rather than the academic research related to honors in action and the honor study guide. So you should think outside the campus. You should think outside the box. What might you study that's in your area that's interesting in terms of that kind of stuff? And advisors, you're out there too. Sometimes your students want to study stuff that you go, really? We have to do that, right? There's a fun Missouri story with one of our advisors that she called us and she was like, my students want to study Asian carp. And I'm like, cool. And she's like, I don't care about Asian carp. I was like, well, you don't have to care about it. They do. Because we're just the coaches and the guides. It's fun. It's fun when we're excited about it as well. But the students are the ones that have to be excited. And sometimes they want to do things that you're like, okay, sure, right? If a student, my students want to study economics, great. I'm going to call somebody that knows more about economics than I do. That way you're stretching your bounds and finding your local experts and things like that. And always remember to talk to experts. The best thing you can do is find the people who wrote the book and call them and interview them. Because you never know what that's going to turn into. You never know what kind of relationship you're going to have with them. Was it last year we did Route 66, and we actually ended up calling the Route 66 Federation and interviewing the director, only to find out while we were interviewing him that the Route 66 grants that the government provided were expiring. And he was seeking people to help him advocate for places that would reestablish the grant. And so we were able to make our little movie and send it to him, and he was able to show that to American Express, who he's trying to get to support the grants. He's going to say, look, there's even young kids who are interested in this, that are still thinking that the Route 66 is cool. So you don't know what the experts might lead you to and what you might find out. How are we doing? Am I doing all right?
Good. I think what really made me think about Route 66 was when it made its appearance in the movie Cars.
Oh yeah.
Because you get a really good. It's actually, when you watch it, it's truth. It's like when the interstates came in, all those little towns got ignored. All of them started turning into ghost towns because people didn't want to go that way. And now, when you get older, or this newer generation comes up, they want to see those cool things that used to be. They want to see that history, that heritage that got left in the dust, and try and bring it back. So you have all these Route 66 towns like Tonica and Pontiac and Dwight that are trying to rebuild their community around Route 66 to attract that tourism, to get those businesses back up and running.
And you also get the fun fact as inheritance and legacy to look at the role of film in the way that filmmakers choose to depict something, and how the legacy of that event will then carry on. And so looking at the perspective of filmmakers is also a really interesting thing, because you've got films out there that are portraying important events in history that are wrong, that are embellishments of things that never happened. And what role are those going to play in the legacy of those events in terms of those types of things? And do we have a responsibility as the inheritors of those things to make sure that the filmmakers are telling the truth and those types of things? So it's really interesting. There's also a new film out, The Social Dilemma. Have you guys heard of that yet? Have anybody watched it yet? It's a new film, and it's about Google and Facebook, and it's made by some people who worked for these big social media giants who left because of the moral dilemma, realizing that these companies are manipulating trade and industry. They're manipulating the entire world based off of the things that they do at those companies. And they've actually got it down to a science, and actually know exactly what to show you on your Facebook feed to make you want to buy that thing. So that's another interesting thing you can study, is social media trade and industry, and what does it do to impact us? There's so much that you can do with this one.
Oh, I agree with that. I think it's totally taken over. There's no pop culture anymore. It's all being led by social media and marketing, and yeah,
and the people that those companies call and pay to influence you.
Yep.
Because there are people on Instagram and TikTok who are making six-figure salaries from Google and Facebook to tell you what to think.
Yep, basically, yeah. What to watch on TV. I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy because I know, like going back to Facebook, they have algorithms that once, if you notice, you go on Facebook and then you go open up a new tab and you're looking at Walmart or you're shopping and then you go back to your Facebook page, that stuff you were just looking at is on your Facebook page. So it's like it's a genius marketing strategy because it's like, oh, I was just looking at that, maybe I'll buy it now. But
it's terrifying.
it is terrifying because it makes you think, well, what else are you tracking that I'm doing?
No, do you know what's scary, Raymond? So now with websites, if you are just visiting their website, they know what type of operating system you're on, your IP address, your contact information, that they can call you while you're on their website.
Yeah.
We just had that discussion at work today. It's
Yeah.
creepy, like I will never go back to that site if you're calling me while I'm on there.
Which then creates really interesting research questions about the moral dilemma
Mhm.
associated with
Yep.
shopping. Like
Yeah.
shopping is no longer, I just want to go buy this shirt.
Right.
Because now shopping online is going to provide that retailer with information about you that maybe you didn't know you were sharing with them.
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of really interesting research projects that you can do. And you don't have to think massive with that, right? You could think about a project or like the impact on teenagers in relationship to online shopping and their awareness of digital privacy. And then you can do a project where you are providing information to teenagers about the truth of the things that they do online. So many interesting places to play.
With Thanksgiving coming up too, and you got Black Friday and Cyber Monday, would that inheritance and the craftsmanship and trade of that, how online shopping has evolved to where it's kind of destructing family values versus the going out for the deal, would that be a good thing for?
Oh yeah, because you think about how that's going to be different now. That's going to dramatically change now. And is that going to change forever? Or is that just changing this year? Because what's an interesting thing to think about is what, in terms of craftsmanship, trade, and industry, what has COVID done to change the strategy of all of these companies? Especially in the arts. Think about the arts and how it's being impacted right now. All of the things that are closing, that are entertainment related, and how are they going to evolve? What legacy is COVID going to give to the entertainment industry? Are they going to even be able to survive anymore in terms of those types of things? Broadway is shut down until June 1st. Here locally, I just found out today that one of our local improv companies is selling everything because they can't stay afloat. But I have friends in Arizona who do improv with their little theater, got super creative and has turned everything into this online format, and they're booming. So it's surviving. It actually is growing, where locally ours died in terms of those types of things. Second City, good old Chicago staple, right? They do digital shows now. You can go to a Second City improv show for free, and they just put them out online, and they have different casts from all over the country logging in from wherever they are and doing shows and teaching classes. Even education. Look at the things that we've done differently. My friends are taking improv classes from an improv company in London because people got really interested in the way that they can promote their industry in terms of those types of things, right? So there's so much. I hope that you guys play with this one because there's a lot of really cool places to play. And Illinois has got really cool stuff. I mean, the zipper, come on.
Yeah.
I'm so interested I saw this, I was reading it about it, and I was like, I'm now gonna have to go research zippers because I'm that weird dude. This is gonna be super funny. Even the World's Fair, you guys got burlesque and Sally Rand. So there's some interesting stuff there. I'm sure you don't want to go to your college president and be like, we're studying burlesque, but you never know. All right, has this been helpful?
Yes, very.
Good. Any other questions or things you need from me to help out?
Yeah, this is definitely a good chance to ask Steve and bend his mind, because like I said, he's the one, he wrote this theme. So if you guys, especially from Blackhawk, have any questions for him, I definitely fire away and ask. If you have any issues with the theme, or if you're having trouble with the theme, ask away.
It's a fun one. I had a good time playing with this one.
Steve, if I may ask just a general question about honors in action. And so these are going to be like really busy times for the chapters, like they always are, but this year it's extremely difficult anyway.
Yes.
Do you have any tips for the chapters, how they can get together and finish their projects and do the hallmark writing, while most of them are probably off campus and it's really difficult to motivate members and get them together?
What we've been doing is we've been actually taking some tips from gamers, and so we're using Discord and different like gaming platforms where people are gaming and they talk to each other while they're playing games and things. So Discord for our chapter has been really good because you can have video meetings over it. You can have audio meetings. You can create different channels to separate your information. We've been really taking kind of a page out of that book in terms of that and listening to. So what we did is we trusted one of our officers who's a big gamer, and she was like, "This works. We can do this." And so we started doing Discord, and so the old people are on the gaming thing and sharing information, and this works really well. We still do Zoom. All of our chapter meetings are Zoom. All of our officer meetings are Zoom. We're in a unique situation. I don't know, maybe if it's unique, it's probably the same in a lot of places, but our college has actually forbidden student organizational meetings in person. So we can't even I can't even meet my officers in person. We have to meet via Zoom and be flexible and willing to do weird times, right? So we meet at 9 o'clock sometimes. We've met at 11. We've met in the morning. Have some fun with it. We're getting ready next week. We're going to be doing a webinar with our region, and we're having a digital pajama party. So we're going to talk about honors in action, and it's going to be a pajama party. Even with my advisors, so in Missouri, we are actually having every other Tuesday, we're having like advisor like happy hour. So we're all just get together and be like, "What's up, guys?" So you've just got to get creative and be willing to be flexible with it. But another thing that my chapter always struggles with, and every new officer team and every chapter group struggles with this, is you also need to realize you don't have to do everything. The whole officer team doesn't have to be responsible for the whole thing all the time. That's why there are multiple officers, and that's why there are committees. And do things that you do well and divide the work. So like I have one officer who's in charge of honors in action, and she and I meet, and then she then goes and meets with her committee. Joe meets with another officer for the college project, and then she goes and meets with her committee. So divide and conquer, and be willing to do weird things. Sometimes just play, by the way. We did as chapter officers with advisors, we agreed to spend some money. I think it was $20 a person, and we actually did a online escape room with our officers just to play. because the officers aren't having a chance to bond. So have a movie party, have a pajama party, do an escape room. Think of weird, interesting ways that you can engage online when you still can't meet each other. Because yeah, we've been stuck completely virtual. We can't do anything in person. And I know that in Missouri, a lot of the colleges are like that. We can't do anything. So we live in a non-masked state. So
Thank you.
that help?
Really helpful. Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
So in terms of online websites, define what kind of resources you're looking for. You're looking for like honors and action stuff, or are you looking for like team building stuff? What kind of things are you looking for there, Blaze? Because the PTK website's full of it, right? And when I was looking for Illinois stuff, I was Googling the heck out of Illinois and then picking all the keywords, right? So I was Illinois industry, Illinois craftsmanship, Illinois artisans, Illinois trade routes. So I was thinking about all of the different things associated with this theme. And then I just went out and Googled and found information to start with. Always remember that Google is your friend to begin, but it should not be your ending. Right? It should be the place to start. People will probably just go like, oh my gosh, right? Wikipedia is a great place to start, even though it sounds crazy. When I wanted to know about Sally Rand, I went and looked up Sally Rand and I found the Wikipedia page, and then I went to the resources, then I went and double checked to make sure all the resources were the right resources. And a lot of times you can find seminal resources by looking at all the resources other people are providing. So there's a lot of things that you can do there. Also think about your local history. If you have a history museum in your city or in your region of Illinois, go to that place and talk to the people and find out like what's interesting about your city that you don't really even know about. We have what's called the History Museum on the Square. And there's a gentleman there who, that dude knows the history of Springfield back and forth, upside down, blindfolded. And he can tell you the most random facts about Springfield, Missouri that people were just like, really? I had no idea. The last legit lynching occurred in Springfield, Missouri in the 1980s.
Wow.
On the square. And so that's an interesting thing to be thinking about in this day and age, and with this topic specifically. So he knows, think about those places. If you're in Springfield, Illinois, you got the whole Abraham Lincoln thing, and you've got all the stuff there that is really interesting, because there's some legit history there, but there's some legit lies there too. So thinking about those things that you can do, like local experts and things like that, you just got to get creative.
Yeah, go to historical societies if your town has one. Even the library. Sometimes you can find good news clippings at the library. Ask your librarians, because sometimes they're even knowledgeable of what's going on in the town and what's happened in the town.
Oh yeah, always fun. There's always somebody who knows a lot about something.
Yep.
And you might find the expert.
Do we have any more questions?
You guys good? Hopefully I gave you some things to think about.
All right, I'm hitting the stop button.
For recording. All right.